Your sister's mansion matters more than your cheap charade. We board in 10 minutes. Do not call us. That was the text message sitting on my phone the morning of my wedding. It was sent at 5 in the morning. By the time I woke up and read it, the two people who were supposed to stand by my side and celebrate the happiest day of my life were already 30,000 feet in the air, flying toward Miami. They abandoned my wedding to save my younger sister, Serafina, from a crisis of her own making. I did not cry when I read those words. I did not throw my phone across the room. I just stared at the screen, letting the familiar, heavy weight of being the invisible daughter settle into my chest. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had delivered the ultimate punishment for my independence. What they did not know, and what my mother would not realize until a viral video tore her perfectly curated world apart, was that she had just handed me the cleanest exit of my life. But to understand the sheer magnitude of the avalanche that buried my family, we have to go back to the night before. The rehearsal dinner. That was where my mother made her fatal miscalculation. I hosted the dinner in the private back room of a high-end steakhouse in downtown Chicago. The room smelled of expensive aged beef, roasted garlic, and the rich, oaky scent of vintage red wine. I paid for it. I paid for all of it, just like I paid for the greenhouse venue, the catering, the string quartet, and every single flower arrangement for the wedding. I had built a successful supply chain and logistics startup from the ground up. I worked 18-hour days, negotiated contracts that would make grown men sweat, and saved every dollar I earned. My independence was my armor. I handed my credit card to the waiter to cover the $4,000 bill, feeling a quiet sense of pride. I had done this. I was providing a beautiful evening for 40 of my closest friends and the family members who bothered to show up. My mother, Vivian, arrived 20 minutes late. She wore a vivid crimson dress that looked more suited for a gala than a rehearsal dinner. It was a dress designed to pull every eye in the room toward her, a silent declaration that, even at my wedding, she was the main character. She kissed the cheeks of my extended family, laughed loudly, and made her way to the head table. She hugged the room before she hugged me. My father, Harrison, trailed behind her like a shadow. He was already checking his watch, already loosening his tie, looking for the nearest exit. My father is a mid-level manager at a massive hospitality corporation. He has spent his entire adult life nodding at people more powerful than him and avoiding conflict at all costs. And then there was Alaric. Alaric sat beside me, dressed in a simple, unbranded charcoal button-down shirt. He did not wear a flashy watch. He did not command the room with loud stories. He just sat there, his broad shoulders relaxed, radiating a quiet, grounded strength. My family assumed he was just some guy. Some working-class laborer I had picked up out of desperation because we had only known each other for 3 weeks. My mother had spent the entire evening throwing thinly veiled insults his way, asking if his line of work offered dental insurance, and suggesting he try not to spill gravy on his shirt. Alaric just smiled politely and squeezed my hand under the table. Dessert was cleared. The low hum of conversation filled the room. That was when my mother stood up. She picked up a heavy silver fork and tapped it against her crystal wine glass. It was not a gentle sound. It was a sharp, demanding summons. The room fell silent. 40 faces turned toward her. "I want to say a few words," my mother announced, smoothing the front of her crimson dress. Her voice carried the practiced, sickeningly sweet tone she always used when she was about to deliver a blow. "Genevieve has always been our independent girl. She is so strong, so self-sufficient. She has never really needed us." My stomach tightened. I knew that tone. The word independent in my mother's vocabulary was not a compliment. It was an excuse. "Because she never needs us, I know she will understand what I have to say," my mother continued, her gaze sweeping across the room, gathering an audience for her performance. "Serafina is facing a massive emergency with her real estate project down in Miami. It is a critical situation. Her mansion, her entire livelihood, is on the line. And as her parents, Harrison and I have to step up. We are flying out at dawn tomorrow." A heavy, suffocating silence dropped over the room. People stopped chewing. Forks hovered midair. Tomorrow was my wedding day. My mother turned her eyes directly to me. She smiled. A chilling, flawless smile. It is a cute little gathering you have put together here, sweetheart. But Serafina needs her family right now. We cannot waste time on a cheap charade when your sister's future is at stake. You understand, right? You always do. 40 people heard her call my wedding a cheap charade. 40 people watched a mother look her eldest daughter in the eye and publicly choose the younger sister. I felt the blood roaring in my ears. I reached across with my right hand and gripped my left wrist, my fingers pressing hard into the cheap leather strap of the watch my grandmother had given me years ago. It was a grounding mechanism. I pressed until the metal buckle dug into my skin, leaving a red mark. If I yelled, I would be the hysterical bride. If I cried, I would give her the satisfaction of breaking me in public. In my family, the person who raises their voice loses. I had stopped losing to her a long time ago. I looked at my mother. I kept my voice entirely level, loud enough for the table to hear, but devoid of any emotion she could feed on. Okay, that was it. One word. My mother blinked. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She had packed for a war, and I had handed her nothing but empty air. My father stared fiercely at his half-empty water glass, refusing to meet my eyes. Beside me, Alaric shifted. I felt his gaze on the side of my face. I turned to look at him. He wasn't looking at my mother with anger. He was looking at her with the cold, analytical evaluation of a predator watching a rabbit wander into a trap. He knew exactly what she had just done. And he knew exactly what it was going to cost her. He didn't say a word. He just gave me a barely perceptible nod. The dinner wrapped up quickly after that. People do not linger around a fresh wound. My older cousin, Maeve, squeezed my shoulder on her way out, her face pale with second-hand embarrassment, but she didn't say anything to defend me. My mother thought she had won. She walked out of that steakhouse believing she had put me in my place. But she had no idea who she had just insulted, and she had no idea what tomorrow would bring. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of neon streetlights and silence. I walked into my living room, stepping over half-packed cardboard boxes. I was supposed to be moving into Alaric's place after the wedding, starting a new life. Instead, I sat on the hardwood floor, surrounded by packing tape, and let the echoes of my mother's voice bounce around my head. A cheap charade. I should have been surprised. I really should have. But my entire life had been a carefully curated museum of my own invisibility. I was the glass display case that everyone walked past to get to the main attraction, Serafina. Serafina was the golden child. 3 years younger than me, she was loud, demanding, and possessed a talent for making the world bend to her moods. My parents did not just love her, they worshipped the chaos she created because it gave them a purpose. I, on the other hand, was the weather. Reliable, quiet, and easily ignored until it stormed. Sitting on that floor, 3 distinct memories played out in my mind, vivid and sharp. The first was when I was 14. I had spent 2 months building a complex, motorized solar system diorama for the state science fair. It was flawless. I won first place for my district. The finals were held on a Saturday afternoon in a massive high school auditorium. I stood by my table for 4 hours, waiting for the doors to open, waiting for my parents to walk in. They never came. Serafina, who was 11 at the time, had a junior cheerleading showcase across town. It wasn't a competition, it was just a practice performance. But my parents chose the bleachers of a sticky gymnasium over my state finals. My grandmother, Beatrix, was the only one who showed up. She bought me a hot dog afterward and told me, "You don't need a crowd to know you shine, Genevieve." The second memory hit harder. I was 22, working my first real corporate job. I lived on ramen and walked 30 minutes to the train in the freezing Chicago wind, all to save $5,000 to buy a used Honda Civic. I kept the cash in a thick envelope in my sock drawer, proud of every single bill. One afternoon, I came home to find the envelope gone. When I confronted my parents, my mother didn't even look guilty. She looked annoyed. Serafina, 19 at the time, was trying to become a lifestyle influencer and had maxed out 2 credit cards on designer handbags. The collection agencies were calling. We had to pay them, Genevieve, my mother had sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. You're smart, you'll save it again. Your sister is fragile. We have to protect her. The third memory was the one that finally forged my armor. I was 26. I had just signed the lease on a tiny, 2-room office space for my logistics startup. It was my pride and joy. The ink was barely dry when my parents ambushed me. Serafina needed a creative space for her photography business, a business that consisted entirely of taking selfies. They relentlessly pressured me, guilt-tripping me for weeks until I caved and let Serafina use the second room. She trashed it. She left empty iced coffee cups everywhere, brought loud friends over during my conference calls, and never paid a dime of rent. When I finally kicked her out, my parents didn't speak to me for a month. I was the designated survivor. The child they could steal from because I would never force them to pay me back. But tomorrow was supposed to be mine. Morning broke over Chicago, painting the sky in pale, forgiving shades of pink and gold. I woke up, read the text message from my mother about the Miami mansion, and set my phone face down on the counter. I made a cup of black coffee. I did not cry. I drove myself to the venue, a stunning, restored botanical greenhouse made of wrought iron and sweeping glass panels. The air inside smelled of damp earth, blooming jasmine, and fresh rain. It was breathtaking. My cousin Maeve was waiting in the bridal suite. She zipped me into my wedding dress, a sleek, unadorned silk gown that felt like liquid pearl against my skin. Maeve was unusually quiet, her eyes darting nervously toward the door. They really didn't come, did they? Maeve whispered, her hands hovering over the delicate buttons on my back. No, I said, looking at my reflection. I looked calm. I looked like a woman who was no longer waiting to be rescued. Maeve's jaw tightened. She spun around, grabbed a thick black marker and 2 heavy pieces of cardstock. She scribbled furiously, then marched out of the bridal suite. When I walked out a few minutes later, the string quartet was playing a slow, hauntingly beautiful melody. The greenhouse was filled with 80 guests. And in the very front row, right where the parents of the bride should sit, were 2 empty wooden chairs. Taped to the back of those chairs were the cards Maeve had written. In bold, unmistakable black letters, Mother of the Bride, Vivian, and Father of the Bride, Harrison. They sat there, glaringly empty, a monument to their absence. I walked down the aisle alone. I felt the collective gasp of the guests. I saw the pity wash over their faces, the confused whispers, the hands covering mouths. I did not care. I kept my chin high, my eyes locked on the end of the aisle. Alaric stood there. He was wearing a dark, impeccably tailored suit that finally gave away a hint of the power he usually kept hidden. When I reached him, he didn't offer a sad smile. He reached out, grasped my hand firmly, and whispered, "You look like a queen walking through ruins." When the officiant asked who gave this woman away, the silence in the greenhouse was deafening. I looked directly at the 2 empty chairs. Then I turned to Alaric, my voice ringing clear and steady through the glass walls. I give myself. Somewhere in the 3rd row, a 19-year-old photographer's assistant named Maya had her phone out. She thought the moment was tragically beautiful. She recorded my walk, the empty chairs with the name tags, and my clear, unflinching declaration. She posted it online later that afternoon. I thought the ceremony was the end of it. I thought I had survived the worst they could do to me, and now I could just go live my life. But the internet loves a villain, and it loves a mystery even more. The video didn't just stay on a small photography page. It caught an algorithm. It started climbing. 10,000 views by sunset. 50,000 by midnight. And as the numbers ticked up, strangers on the internet started doing what they do best. They paused the video. They zoomed in. They analyzed the faces in the crowd. And they recognized the man holding my hand. By the time the sun rose on Monday morning, my quiet, solitary walk down the aisle had become a ticking time bomb buried right under my father's desk. Our honeymoon was not in Paris or the Maldives. We both ran companies that required our attention, and neither of us wanted the fuss of international travel right away. Instead, Alaric drove us 2 hours north of Chicago to a private, secluded cabin he owned on the shores of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. It was a sanctuary built of dark wood, massive stone fireplaces, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the calm, gray water. It was quiet. So incredibly quiet. I had deliberately turned my phone off for the entire weekend. I wanted 48 hours where the world did not exist. Where my family did not exist. On Monday morning, the smell of fresh coffee pulled me out of sleep. I walked out to the expansive wooden deck, wrapping a thick wool blanket around my shoulders against the crisp morning air. Alaric was already out there, leaning against the railing, holding 2 mugs. He handed me one, his eyes soft but calculating. "You might want to turn your phone on," he said softly, taking a sip of his coffee. The world got a little loud while we were offline. I frowned, pulling my phone from my robe pocket. I held down the power button. The screen illuminated with the Apple logo, then the home screen appeared. The device practically vibrated out of my hand as notifications flooded in like a broken dam. 61 missed calls from my mother. 12 missed calls from my father. 14 text messages from Serafina. A voicemail from a number with a downtown Chicago area code. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline hit my bloodstream. I ignored my family for a moment and tapped on the unknown voicemail. I pressed the phone to my ear. "Genevieve, good morning. Or, I suppose it's Mrs. Vance now. Congratulations." The voice was polished, sharp, and unmistakably corporate. "This is Eleanor, Chief of Staff for Nathaniel Vance, no relation to your husband, of course, at the regional office. Nathaniel is your father's superior. He would very much like to arrange a meeting with you this Thursday. It concerns a rather delicate matter regarding a video circulating online. Please call me back." I lowered the phone, staring out at the lake. Nathaniel, the regional director. The man my father had spent the last 5 years trying to impress, buying him expensive scotch at Christmas and laughing too hard at his terrible jokes. "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Alaric set his mug down. He picked up his iPad from the patio table, unlocked it, and handed it to me. The screen showed a social media platform. The video the photographer's assistant took was playing on a loop. There I was, walking past the empty chairs. The caption read, "Her parents ditched her wedding for a vacation. She gave herself away. But watch who catches her at the altar." The view count was sitting at 1.8 million. I scrolled down to the comments. They weren't talking about my dress or the tragedy of the empty chairs. They were talking about Alaric. Wait, is that Alaric Vance? The real estate billionaire? Bro, her parents skipped the wedding of a Vance? The CEO of Vance Hospitality Group? I know her dad. He works for a mid-tier hospitality firm in Chicago. His company has been begging Vance Group for a contract for 3 years. I stopped breathing. The dots connected in my mind with terrifying speed. My mother hadn't just skipped my wedding. She had publicly humiliated the one man who held the key to the most lucrative contract my father's company had ever bid on. I tapped my voicemail icon and played the first message from my mother. It was from Sunday morning. "Genevieve, what is this video? Why are people messaging me? You need to take this down right now, it is embarrassing. Handle this." Her tone was annoyed, bossy. I played the next one, from Sunday night. "Genevieve, pick up the phone. Do you have any idea what you've done? Your father's boss just saw the video. He called Harrison. Who is that man? Why didn't you tell us who he was? Pick up." Panic. Raw, unfiltered panic. She wasn't sorry she missed my wedding. She was terrified she had missed out on a billionaire. I looked up at Alaric. "They know." "They know," Alaric agreed, his expression hardening. "But that isn't even the worst part. Your family really likes to play with fire, Genevieve." He reached over, tapped the screen of the iPad, and opened his personal email application. He clicked on an email that had arrived at 2 a.m. the night before. "When they figured out who I was, your mother panicked," Alaric said, his voice dropping to a dangerous octave. "But your sister?" Serafina saw an opportunity. I stared at the screen. The sender was Serafina. The subject line read, "A private investment opportunity/apology for the drama." My eyes scanned the text. "Dear Alaric, I am so incredibly embarrassed by the video circulating online. My sister Genevieve has always been a bit dramatic and loves playing the victim. Between you and me, she staged those chairs for attention. I'm so sorry you got dragged into her cheap little charade. My vision blurred with pure, unadulterated rage. Cheap little charade. She had stolen my mother's exact words. I would love to meet up with you in person to apologize properly. I'm actually running a massive lifestyle and real estate project down here in Miami, and I know someone with your vision would see the immense potential. Genevieve doesn't really understand business the way we do. Let's get drinks. Just the two of us. Sarah. Attached to the email was a business proposal deck and 3 photos of Serafina in a bikini, lounging by a pool, looking seductively at the camera. She wasn't just trying to throw me under the bus to save her own skin. She was actively trying to seduce my husband, undermine my marriage, and pitch him her garbage business venture, less than 48 hours after I said my vows. I handed the iPad back to Alaric. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from a cold, violent fury that I had never felt before. She sent that to you while she was in Miami, I stated, my voice devoid of warmth. While my parents were down there, saving her mansion. Yes, Alaric said. He stepped closer, cupping my face with one large, warm hand. I didn't respond. I kept it as evidence. Genevieve, say the word, and I will unleash an army of corporate lawyers on them. I will bury your father's career, and I will make sure your sister never gets alone in North America again. I closed my eyes, leaning into his touch. The temptation was overwhelming. To just let him crush them. But that would be easy. That would be loud. And my family fought with noise. No, I opened my eyes, meeting his intense gaze. I don't want you to ruin them. I want to do it myself. I want them to look at me when it happens. I thought the email was the lowest they could go. I thought I had seen the absolute bottom of their depravity. But my phone buzzed again in my hand. It was a text from my cousin Maeve. General, you need to call me. Right now. I found something. It's about Grandma Beatrix's trust fund. I am so sorry. I stared at the text, the blood draining from my face. The storm wasn't over. It was just gathering strength. I hit the call button on Maeve's contact name before my brain even fully processed her text. The line rang barely half a second before she picked up. Maeve, I said, my voice tight. What did you find? Jen, are you sitting down? Is Alaric with you? Maeve's voice was trembling, thick with tears. She sounded terrified. I sank into one of the heavy wooden deck chairs, pulling the blanket tighter around me. Alaric pulled up a chair beside me, leaning in so he could hear. I'm sitting. Alaric is here. Tell me. Maeve took a ragged breath. First I have to confess something. And I need you to know how deeply ashamed I am. I frowned, exchanging a confused look with Alaric. Confess what? Your mother. Aunt Vivian. She cornered me 3 days before the wedding, Maeve blurted out, her words rushing together in a panic stream. She offered to pay my rent for the month if I went to your wedding and acted as a spy. My stomach plummeted. A spy? She wanted me to take ugly photos, Maeve sobbed softly. She told me to take pictures of the cheap food, if the flowers looked wilted, if you looked stressed. She wanted me to send them to the family group chat so she and your dad could laugh about how pathetic your little party was while they were in Miami. She wanted proof that you were a failure without them. I felt physically sick. My own mother had tried to hire a saboteur to document my humiliation. But I didn't do it, Jen, I swear. Maeve cried. When I saw you in that dress, when I saw how beautiful the greenhouse was and how strong you looked walking down that aisle alone, I felt sick to my stomach. I taped those name cards to the chairs because I wanted everyone to know what monsters they were. I couldn't be a part of it. It's okay, Maeve, I said softly, forcing the anger down. You did the right thing. You didn't take the photos. I did something better, she said, her voice hardening with a sudden, fierce resolve. I recorded her. My eyes widened. You recorded my mother? When she offered me the money, we were in a coffee shop. I had my phone on the table. I hit record. I have her on tape calling your wedding a joke and asking me to ruin it. I just sent you the audio file. I pulled the phone away from my ear, saw the audio file in our text thread, and forwarded it to Alaric. He nodded, saving it immediately to a secure cloud drive. Thank you, Maeve, I said, putting the phone back to my ear. That helps. But what about Grandma Beatrix? You mentioned her trust fund. The line went dead quiet for a long moment. The only sound was the wind coming off the lake. Jen. As an auditor, I have access to certain banking networks. When the video blew up, I started wondering how Aunt Vivian and Uncle Harrison could afford to fly to Miami on a moment's notice and bail Serafina out of a mansion crisis. They don't have that kind of liquid cash. My heart started to pound a heavy, frantic rhythm against my ribs. What did you find, Maeve? Grandma Beatrix left a trust fund for you, Maeve said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She set it up 5 years ago. It was supposed to mature on your 30th birthday, to be used for a wedding, or a house, or whatever you needed so you would never have to depend on your parents. I knew about the fund. Grandma had mentioned it once before she passed. But when I turned 30, my parents told me the money had been tied up in legal fees and taxes, and there was barely anything left. I hadn't fought them on it. I never fought them on anything. How much was in it? I asked, dread pooling in my gut. $85,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $85,000. That was life-changing money. That was the security my grandmother had bled for, working double shifts at her diner, saving every penny so her invisible granddaughter would have a safety net. Where is it, Maeve? My voice was terrifyingly calm now. The calm before a hurricane. They took it, General. They forged your signature on the release documents 2 weeks ago. I have the digital copies of the wire transfers. They drained the entire account of $85,000 and wired it to a corporate account in Miami. Serafina's account, I stated, the puzzle pieces slamming together with violent clarity. Worse, Maeve corrected. I ran the LLC the money went to. Serafina doesn't own a mansion. She isn't running a real estate project. She ran a fraudulent crowdfunding campaign for a luxury lifestyle festival that never existed. She stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from investors to fund her Instagram lifestyle. The feds were closing in on her. The investors were threatening to go to the FBI. Alaric cursed under his breath, a sharp, ugly word. The $85,000, Maeve continued, crying again, was used as a hush money settlement. Your parents stole your inheritance, forged your signature, and committed federal wire fraud to pay off Serafina's victims out of court so she wouldn't go to federal prison. They hadn't just skipped my wedding for a vacation. They had robbed a dead woman. They had robbed me. They committed a felony to clean up the criminal mess of the golden child, and they used my grandmother's love to do it. I hung up the phone. I didn't say goodbye to Maeve. I just lowered the phone to my lap and stared at the gray, churning water of the lake. I saw the receipt in my mind's eye. I imagined my mother, sitting at a bank desk, carefully forging my name, signing away $85,000 of Grandma Beatrix's sweat and tears, all to protect the daughter who threw her life away for internet likes. I didn't scream. I didn't cry for the money. I leaned forward, buried my face in my hands, and I wept for Beatrix. I wept for the old woman who smelled like vanilla and flour, who told me I was worth something. Her final gift to me desecrated, torn apart to shield a parasite. Alaric didn't offer empty comforts. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He pulled me against his chest, wrapping his arms around me, letting me shake. They took her from me, I choked out, clutching his shirt. They took the last piece of her. I know, Alaric murmured into my hair, his voice vibrating with a quiet, lethal promise. And they are going to pay for every single cent. I pulled back, wiping my face. The tears stopped. The grief was still there, but it was hardening, calcifying into something sharp and unbreakable. Call Eleanor back, I told Alaric, my voice hoarse but steady. Tell Nathaniel's office I will be at the corporate headquarters on Thursday morning at 10. I will meet him. I looked down at the forged signature Maeve had just emailed me. They thought I was the obedient, silent weather. They forgot that weather can turn into a storm. Thursday morning arrived with a cold, biting wind that whipped off Lake Michigan, rattling the windows of the apartment. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, evaluating my reflection. I did not wear a designer dress Alaric had bought for me. I did not want to look like the pampered billionaire's wife the internet was trying to paint me as. I wore a tailored, dark navy suit that I had bought with my own money from my logistics company. It was sharp, professional, and entirely uncompromising. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. No jewelry, except for Grandma Beatrix's cheap, scratched watch on my left wrist. I looked like a woman who was about to dismantle a bomb. Or detonate one. Alaric drove us into the city in silence. His presence was a solid, comforting wall of heat next to me in the car. As we navigated the morning traffic, he handed me his phone. "You should see this before we walk in," he said quietly. "Your mother has been busy." I took the phone. It was a video posted to the same platform where my wedding clip had gone viral. There was my mother, sitting in her pristine, beige living room. The lighting was soft, flattering. She was wearing a modest cardigan, holding a tissue crumpled in one hand. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes perfectly welling with practiced tears. "I am the mother in that terrible wedding video everyone is sharing," she began, her voice trembling with manufactured grief. "And I am begging you all to please understand that there are always two sides to a story. My daughter, Genevieve, has been estranged from us for a long time. It breaks my heart. On the weekend of her wedding, we had a terrifying, life-or-death family emergency regarding my youngest daughter. We had no choice but to fly to Miami to save her." She dabbed at her dry eyes with the tissue. "We begged Genevieve to postpone, but she refused. She has always been so cold, so distant. She used those empty chairs to humiliate us, to punish us for prioritizing a family emergency. We are receiving death threats. Please leave my family alone. We are grieving the loss of our daughter's love." I watched the video twice. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She hadn't addressed the billionaire husband. She hadn't addressed the exact words she used at the rehearsal dinner. She just threw a blanket of victimhood over the entire situation. And it was working. I scrolled down to the comments. The internet tide was turning. "Honestly, the bride seems toxic. Who puts name cards on empty chairs just to shame their parents? If there was a real medical emergency, the bride is a monster for not postponing. She married a billionaire after 3 weeks? Smells like a gold digger who wanted a viral moment." I handed the phone back to Alaric. I didn't feel angry. I felt an eerie, profound sense of calm. "She thinks public opinion is going to save her," I said, looking out the window as the massive glass towers of downtown Chicago loomed closer. "She doesn't realize we aren't fighting in the court of public opinion today." Alaric parked the car in the VIP underground garage of the corporate high-rise where my father worked. We walked toward the private elevator banks. "I can come up with you," Alaric offered, his hand resting on the small of my back. "No," I said firmly. "If you walk in there, Nathaniel will cater to you. He will focus on you. I need him looking at me. I need my parents looking at me." Alaric nodded slowly, understanding the assignment. "I'll be in the lobby cafe. Take your time, Genevieve. Leave nothing standing." I stepped into the glass elevator and hit the button for floor 41. The regional executive suites. The doors slid shut. As the elevator shot upward, my stomach gave a slight lurch, but I forced my breathing to steady. I thought about the $85,000. I thought about the forged signature. I thought about Serafina's bikini photos sent to my husband. The elevator pinged. Floor 41. The doors opened to a sprawling reception area decorated in marble and brushed steel. A massive portrait of the corporate board hung on the wall. I walked past the receptionist, who recognized my name immediately and pointed me down the long, carpeted hallway toward Nathaniel's corner office. As I approached the heavy oak doors, I could hear muffled voices from inside. My mother's voice, high-pitched and pleading. My father's low, panicked rumble. They had set the stage. They were trying to control the narrative before I even walked into the room. I did not knock. I pushed the heavy oak doors open and stepped inside. The room froze. Nathaniel, a sharp-featured man with silver hair and a $5,000 suit, sat behind a massive mahogany desk. My father, Harrison, was sunken into a leather guest chair, sweating through his shirt. Serafina was slouched on a small sofa in the corner, chewing gum loudly, reeking of cheap vanilla perfume. And my mother, Vivian, was standing right in the center of the room, dabbing her eyes with a tissue mid-sentence in whatever sob story she was feeding the regional director. My mother had deliberately arranged the guest chairs so that there was nowhere for me to sit. It was a classic power play. Make Genevieve stand. Make Genevieve look small. I didn't move toward them. I stopped just inside the doorway, closing the door firmly behind me with a loud, definitive click. By standing by the door, I forced every single person in that room to turn their chairs and bodies to face me. I controlled the focal point of the room. Genevieve, my mother gasped, placing a hand over her chest as if my presence wounded her. You came. I didn't look at her. I looked directly past her, locking eyes with the most powerful man in my father's universe. Mr. Vance, I said, my voice carrying the chill of the lake wind. I hear you have some questions about my wedding. If you're following and feeling Genevieve's outrage, please leave a comment with the phrase, I'm Win. That's my private code to let you know you're part of this journey for justice. I will like and reply directly to any comment containing the keyword, I'm Win. Thank you for your support. Nathaniel Vance folded his hands on his massive mahogany desk. He did not look at my mother. He did not look at the crumpled tissue in her hand or the perfectly manufactured tears pooling in her eyes. He looked at me. Mrs. Vance, Nathaniel said, his voice smooth and devoid of any warmth. Thank you for coming in. Please have a seat. I prefer to stand, thank you, I replied, keeping my posture rigid, my back resting lightly against the heavy oak door. My mother's face twitched. She hated when I did not follow the script. Genevieve, stop being difficult, she hissed under her breath, a venomous whisper meant only for me. She turned back to Nathaniel, pasting the tragic mother expression back onto her face. Mr. Vance, as I was saying, we are just a family trying to heal. My daughter has a history of these dramatic outbursts, and we are simply trying to protect her from herself. We had a genuine, life-threatening emergency with Serafina in Miami. We had to go. Nathaniel held up one single, manicured finger. The gesture was so small, yet it silenced my mother instantly. Vivian, is it? Nathaniel asked, though he clearly already knew her name. I am going to stop you right there. I did not invite you into my office to mediate a family dispute. I frankly do not care about your family dynamics. I care about the liability sitting in my regional management division. He shifted his cold gaze to my father. Harrison physically shrank into the leather guest chair. Harrison, Nathaniel said. A video of your daughter's wedding has been circulating. It currently has over 4 million views. Ordinarily, an employee's personal life is none of my business. But the man holding your daughter's hand at the altar happens to be the founder and CEO of Vance Hospitality Group. The silence in the room was so heavy it felt hard to breathe. My father's mouth opened and closed. He looked like a fish suffocating on dry land. Sir, my father stammered, wiping a thick bead of sweat from his forehead. I had no idea. Genevieve never told us. If we had known it was Alaric Vance, we would have never. My father stopped, realizing what he was about to say. He was about to admit that he would have attended my wedding if he knew the groom was a billionaire. He swallowed hard. But then, a sickening shift happened in my father's eyes. The terror slowly morphed into a desperate, greedy kind of hope. He sat up straighter. He looked at me, then back at Nathaniel. But, Mr. Vance, my father said, his voice gaining a pathetic, eager momentum. This is actually incredible news for our division, isn't it? We have been trying to secure the riverfront contract with Vance Group for 3 years. Genevieve is my daughter. We are family. I can bridge this gap. I can get Alaric to the table. This changes everything for my promotion to vice president. I watched my father try to sell my marriage to his boss. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a profound, icy detachment. Nathaniel stared at my father for a long, agonizing minute. Then he let out a short, humorless laugh. Harrison, you truly are living in a delusion, Nathaniel said, shaking his head. He reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a thin manila folder, and tossed it onto the center of the desk. Do you know what that is? Nathaniel asked. My father stared at the folder, the color draining from his face once again. No, sir. That is your termination paperwork, Nathaniel stated, his voice ringing with brutal clarity. It was drafted 6 months ago. Your performance has been abysmal. Your division is bleeding revenue. You have been on the chopping block since February. My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. Serafina stopped chewing her gum. The only reason, Nathaniel continued, leaning forward, the singular reason I kept you on the payroll was because a rumor surfaced that you might have a distant connection to Alaric Vance's inner circle. We were desperate for that contract. I kept you around as a pawn, Harrison. A useless pawn on the off chance you could get us a meeting. Nathaniel gestured toward me. And now I find out that the connection was your own daughter. And instead of utilizing it, instead of showing up for her, you abandoned her at the altar for a vacation, publicly insulting the one man who could have saved your entire career. My father buried his face in his hands. A low, pathetic moan escaped his throat. The vice president fantasy shattered into a million irreparable pieces. You are fired, Harrison, Nathaniel said coldly. Security will escort you to pack your desk at the end of this meeting. But before you go, your daughter requested this room to say something to you. And out of respect for her husband, I am giving her the floor. Every eye turned to me. My mother was hyperventilating, her chest heaving. Genevieve, she pleaded, dropping the fake tears. This was real panic. Genevieve, please. Tell him. Tell him we are a good family. Tell him we just made a mistake. I stepped away from the door. I walked slowly toward the center of the room, stopping right in front of the sofa where Serafina was sitting. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. A mistake. I echoed, my voice soft, almost a whisper. Missing a flight is a mistake. Dropping a glass is a mistake. I reached into my tailored suit jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. I tossed it onto Nathaniel's desk, right next to my father's termination papers. Stealing $85,000 from a dead woman's trust fund is not a mistake, I said, my voice slicing through the room. Forging your daughter's signature to commit federal wire fraud is not a mistake. It is a crime. My mother's face turned the color of ash. How did you? Maeve, I stated simply. The name hit my mother like a physical strike. She stumbled backward, grabbing the edge of the desk to keep from falling. I know exactly where you were on my wedding day, I continued, turning my attention fully to Serafina. You were not dealing with a mansion crisis in Miami, Serafina. You were desperately trying to pay off the investors of your fraudulent lifestyle festival before they reported you to the FBI for grand larceny. Serafina opened her mouth to deny it, but nothing came out. And here is the most poetic part of this entire tragedy, I said, leaning down slightly so I was eye level with my sister. Do you know who flagged your fraudulent Miami project to the Securities and Exchange Commission? Do you know who ordered the due diligence report that proved you were running a scam? Serafina shook her head, tears of genuine terror finally spilling down her cheeks. Vance Hospitality Group, I whispered. My husband's company. Alaric ordered his legal team to kill your project a month before I even met him. He knew you were a fraud before he even knew my name. The room was so silent I could hear the hum of the air conditioning vents. I looked at my parents. They were broken. Utterly and entirely broken. You stole Grandma Beatrix's legacy, I said, the grief finally bleeding into my voice, raw and unshielded. You took the money she bled for, the money she saved to keep me safe, and you threw it into the garbage to save a criminal. And you skipped my wedding to do it. You chose her fraud over my future. I turned away from them. I looked at Nathaniel, who was watching the scene with a mixture of shock and grim respect. Thank you for the use of your office, Mr. Vance, I said. I am finished here. I did not wait for a response. I turned the brass handle of the heavy oak door and walked out, leaving them to suffocate in the toxic fumes of their own making. I thought the execution was over. But I underestimated the survival instincts of a cornered rat. 3 days passed. My father was escorted out of his building by security, carrying a cardboard box of his belongings. My mother locked herself in their house, refusing to answer the door or the phone. I focused on my logistics company, burying myself in supply chain metrics and freight contracts, letting the steady rhythm of work ground me. But the silence from my family was not a surrender. It was a tactical retreat. On Monday evening, the intercom in our penthouse buzzed. The doorman's voice crackled through the speaker. "Mrs. Vance, your sister is in the lobby. She bypassed security and is demanding to come up." "Should I call the police?" Alaric looked up from his laptop, his jaw tightening. "Tell him to throw her out." "No," I said, pressing the intercom button. "Send her up." Alaric frowned. "Genevieve, you do not need to deal with her." "If I don't deal with her now, she will keep scratching at the door," I replied. "I need to put a permanent lock on it." 2 minutes later, the private elevator doors slid open in our foyer. Serafina stepped out. She looked terrible. Her expensive hair extensions were messy, her designer clothes looked slept in, and the frantic, manic energy vibrating off her was palpable. She looked around the massive, 2-story penthouse, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, the custom art, the sheer, undeniable wealth. Her eyes narrowed with a toxic cocktail of jealousy and desperation. "Nice place," Serafina sneered, crossing her arms. "Guess the little invisible sister finally found a sugar daddy to foot the bill." I stood 10 feet away from her, keeping my expression entirely neutral. "Why are you here, Serafina?" She dropped the attitude. The desperation clawed its way to the surface. "You have to give them the money back. The $85,000. I stared at her, genuinely astounded by her audacity. "You want me to give you back the money you stole from me? Mom and Dad are going to lose the house." Serafina screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "The lawyers for those Miami investors are threatening a civil suit. If we don't have capital to hire a defense team, Mom and Dad could face conspiracy charges for wiring the money. You have a billionaire husband. $85,000 is pocket change to you. Give it back." "No," I said. It was a full, complete sentence. Serafina's face contorted into something ugly and feral. "Fine. If you want to play it that way, let me tell you how this is going to go. I have a friend who writes for a major gossip outlet. If you don't wire that money by tomorrow morning, I am going to the press. I am going to tell them that the entire wedding video was a staged PR stunt. I will tell them you are a gold digger who trapped a lonely rich man and that you forced Mom and Dad to stay away so you could play the victim." She took a step closer, smiling a venomous, triumphant smile. "How long do you think your fancy new husband will stick around when his company's stock drops because his wife is a manipulative sociopath?" I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the terrified, pathetic little girl hiding behind the threats. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen a few times, navigating to the audio file Maeve had sent me. I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the foyer. "I need you to take photos of everything that looks cheap, Maeve. The food, her dress, everything. I want proof that her little party is a pathetic joke without us." Serafina's smile vanished. "I have the tape of our mother trying to hire a saboteur," I said, putting the phone back in my pocket. "I have the bank records proving you committed wire fraud. And I have the email." Serafina paled. "What email?" "The one you sent my husband at 2 in the morning while my parents were saving you," I said softly. "The one with the bikini photos, asking him for a private investment meeting." Serafina physically recoiled as if I had struck her. "If you ever threaten me again," I promised, my voice barely above a whisper, "if you ever speak my name to a journalist, or a friend, or a stranger on the street, I will release all of it. I will hand the bank records directly to the FBI. I will ruin your life, Serafina. Do you understand me?" She understood. She backed into the elevator, her hands shaking, and hit the lobby button. She didn't say another word. But a cornered animal is unpredictable. Serafina didn't go to a major outlet. She didn't use her own name. She used the darkest, dirtiest corners of the internet. 48 hours later, a blind item appeared on a massive gossip blog, which newly minted billionaire's wife is actually living in a golden cage. Word on the street is the viral abandoned bride was forced to sign a ruthless, ironclad prenuptial agreement before walking down that aisle. She gets zero equity in his company. Zero access to his personal accounts. She is just a glorified, penniless show pony he hired for good PR. No wonder her family stayed away. The internet, fickle and hungry for drama, devoured the lie. The narrative flipped overnight. I went from the tragic, empowered heroine to a pathetic gold digger trapped in a loveless financial arrangement. Comments flooded social media, mocking my cheap suit at the wedding, analyzing my body language, calling me a fraud. Alaric was furious. I found him in his home office, pacing the floor, his phone pressed to his ear, barking orders at his legal team to find the IP address of the blogger and sue them into oblivion. I walked over and gently pushed his phone down. "Don't," I said. "Genevieve, they are dragging your name through the mud," Alaric growled, his protective instincts in overdrive. "I will not let them paint you as some helpless victim I bought." "A lawsuit is defensive," I reasoned, smoothing the lapel of his shirt. "It tells them they hit a nerve. It gives the rumor oxygen. Then how do we kill it?" I looked at the calendar on his desk. This Friday was the Beaux-Arts Gala, the most exclusive, high-stakes industry event in the Midwest. Every major player in supply chain, real estate, and hospitality would be there. And Alaric was the keynote speaker. "We do not kill it with a press release," I said, a slow, cold smile forming on my lips. "We kill it with a public execution. We let them see the shape of the power." Friday night arrived with the kind of electric, nervous energy that prefaces a massive storm. The Beaux-Arts Hotel downtown was a fortress of Gilded Age architecture, boasting ceilings painted to mimic the night sky and chandeliers the size of small cars. Outside, a swarm of photographers huddled behind velvet ropes, flashing their cameras at the executives and socialites stepping out of black town cars. I stood in front of the mirror in our bedroom, preparing my armor. I did not wear a dress covered in diamonds. I wore a deep, emerald green silk gown. It was severe, elegant, and entirely unembellished. Green was Grandma Beatrix's favorite color. Around my wrist, I clasped her old, scratched watch. It was a grounding wire to the woman who taught me how to survive. Alaric stood behind me, adjusting his tuxedo jacket. He met my eyes in the mirror. "Are you ready for this?" "I have been ready for 31 years, I replied. We arrived at the gala, stepping onto the red carpet. The flashbulbs erupted in a blinding strobe effect. Reporters shouted our names, their questions a chaotic roar. "Genevieve, is it true about the prenup? Alaric, did you buy her family's silence?" We ignored them, walking with measured, unified steps into the grand ballroom. The room was packed with 400 of the most influential people in 3 states. The air hummed with wealth, ambition, and quiet, ruthless networking. The moment we stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. You could feel the collective gaze of the room turn toward us. They were whispering. They were looking at me, searching for the invisible strings of the puppet master, looking for the battered, penniless bride the blogs had promised them. I did not shrink. I let go of Alaric's arm. "Go mingle with the board members," I told him, keeping my voice low. "I need to do this part alone." Alaric nodded, his eyes shining with profound respect, and stepped away into the crowd. I walked into the center of the ballroom by myself. And something incredible happened. A silver-haired woman in a stunning Chanel suit approached me. It was Margaret Sterling, the CEO of the largest shipping conglomerate on the East Coast. "Genevieve," Margaret said, extending her hand. "I am so glad to finally meet you in person. Your logistics firm handled the routing crisis in Atlanta last month with terrifying efficiency. My supply chain managers have been singing your praises for weeks." I shook her hand firmly. "Thank you, Margaret. My team thrives under pressure." Before she could walk away, another executive approached, asking for my opinion on the new freight tariffs. Then another. And another. They were not approaching me because I was Alaric Vance's controversial new wife. They were approaching me because I was the founder of a logistics company that was quietly revolutionizing their supply chains. I stood there, holding a glass of sparkling water, holding my own in conversations about international trade, labor strikes, and profit margins. For the first time in my life, in a room full of titans, I was not the invisible daughter. I was a player on the board. And then I saw them. Through the sea of tailored suits and designer gowns, my parents were standing near the grand staircase. They looked utterly out of place. My father looked haggard, wearing a tuxedo that seemed a size too big for his newly diminished frame. He was jobless, disgraced, and holding a glass of cheap wine like a shield. My mother, however, was in survival mode. She wore a heavy, beaded gown, her face painted with a desperate, hungry smile. She was scanning the room, trying to find anyone who would make eye contact with her. And then her eyes locked onto me. I watched the machinery of her mind work in real time. She saw me standing in the center of a circle of powerful executives. She saw the photographers hovering nearby. She saw an opportunity to rewrite history, to save her social standing, to prove the gossip blogs right, that we were just one big, happy, complicated family. She grabbed my father's arm and dragged him across the ballroom toward me. The executives around me noticed my shift in focus and turned to see what was coming. The chatter died down. "Genevieve," my mother cried out, her voice loud enough to carry over the string quartet. She threw her arms open wide, a blinding, theatrical smile plastered on her face. "My darling girl. There you are." She closed the distance rapidly, preparing to wrap me in a highly publicized, deeply fake maternal embrace. The cameras near the wall pivoted toward us, sensing the drama. I did not step back. I did not run. I waited until she was less than 2 feet away, her arms reaching for my shoulders. I raised one single hand, palm out, stopping her dead in her tracks. The gesture was smooth, unhurried, and carried the weight of a judge dropping a gavel. "Do not touch me," I said. My voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It cut through the ambient noise of the ballroom like a scalpel. My mother froze, her arms hovering awkwardly in the air. The fake smile shattered. "Genevieve, sweetheart, please. We are in public. Don't make a scene. Let's just take a photo. Let's show everyone we are healing." She was trying to whisper, trying to keep the facade intact. I looked at the woman who had spent 31 years ensuring I felt small, ensuring I knew I was second best. I looked at the woman who stole from her own mother to protect a criminal. "You want a public display, Vivian?" I asked, my voice calm, ringing clear in the sudden, suffocating silence that had enveloped our corner of the room. "Then let's give them one." I took a step forward, invading her space. "Mom," I said, projecting my voice so the surrounding crowd, the executives, and the reporters could hear every single syllable. "At 11 o'clock in the morning, 3 weeks ago today, where were you?" The silence in the Beaux-Arts ballroom turned physical. The clinking of glasses ceased. The string quartet, sensing the sudden vacuum of noise, faltered and faded into an uncomfortable hum. Hundreds of eyes locked onto the 3 of us. "Where were you?" I repeated, my tone as level and calm as a frozen lake. My mother's face flushed a deep, mottled red. Her eyes darted wildly around the room, taking in the stares of the CEOs, the socialites, the people she had spent her entire adult life trying to impress. She was trapped in the spotlight she had always craved, and it was burning her alive. "Genevieve, please," she hissed, her voice trembling. "Not here. You are embarrassing yourself." "I am not the one who is embarrassed," I replied, refusing to break eye contact. "Answer the question. Where were you when I walked down the aisle?" She opened her mouth, but the lies she usually relied on caught in her throat. She couldn't say it was a medical emergency. The rumor mill had already poked holes in that. She couldn't say it was a misunderstanding. She stammered, her hands shaking. She looked at my father for help, but Harrison was staring at the marble floor, looking like a man marching to the gallows. "I will help you," I offered, my voice steady and unyielding. "You were in Miami. You were using $85,000 that you stole from my grandmother's trust fund to pay off the victims of Serafina's wire fraud scam." A collective, audible gasp rippled through the immediate crowd. The words "stole" and "fraud" echoed in the high-ceilinged room. My mother snapped. The pressure cracked her wide open, exposing the toxic, ugly core beneath the beaded gown. "You ungrateful wretch," she shrieked, her voice cracking, abandoning any pretense of dignity. "We gave you everything. You are nothing without us. You are just a vindictive, cold-hearted girl who trapped a rich man to get back at your own family. You have no power here. You are nothing but his property." She was regurgitating the gossip logs. She was using the fake prenup rumor as her final weapon, screaming it for the whole room to hear, desperate to pull me down into the mud with her. "She doesn't even own the clothes on her back," my mother yelled to the crowd, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She signed away her rights. She is a nobody." I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice to match hers. I just let her scream, letting the entire upper echelon of Chicago society witness the monster I had grown up with. When she finally ran out of breath, chest heaving, the room remained dead silent. And then my father broke. "Stop it, Vivian," Harrison croaked. His voice was raw, shredded by shame. My mother whipped her head toward him, her eyes blazing. "Shut up, Harrison. Defend your wife." "She is telling the truth," my father said, lifting his head. Tears were streaming down his face, ruining the collar of his cheap tuxedo. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked only at me. "We stole the money," my father confessed, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "We abandoned you. We chose Serafina because she needed us to fix her messes, and you never needed us to fix anything. You were too strong. We punished you for your strength." "I am so sorry, Genevieve. I am so sorry." It was the closest thing to an honest apology he had ever given me. It was pathetic, it was decades too late, but it was the truth. My mother stared at him in sheer horror, realizing her own husband had just hammered the final nail into her social coffin. Before she could launch another attack, the heavy velvet curtains on the main stage parted. A spotlight cut through the dim room, illuminating the microphone stand. Alaric Vance walked onto the stage. The ambient murmurs died instantly. The tension in the room pivoted from the family drama on the floor to the billionaire on the stage. This was what everyone had been waiting for. The keynote speech. The moment Alaric would address the rumors. Alaric adjusted the microphone. He did not look at his notes. He looked directly across the ballroom, locking eyes with me. "Good evening," Alaric's voice boomed through the speakers, deep and commanding. "I was asked to speak tonight about the future of logistics and hospitality infrastructure in the Midwest. About power and who holds it." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "There has been a great deal of speculation recently about my personal life, about my marriage, specifically about the legal boundaries of the power my wife holds within my empire." My mother sneered, a nasty, victorious little smile curling her lips. She thought he was about to confirm the prenup. She thought she was about to be proven right. "It is true," Alaric continued, his voice hardening, "that legal documents were drafted. But the internet, as always, got the details backwards." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, legal document bound in a blue leather cover. "This morning," Alaric said, raising the document for the room to see, "Vance Hospitality Group closed the acquisition of the Northwestern Logistics Port Authority. It is a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure project that will control 70% of the commercial freight moving through this region." The executives in the room murmured in shock. That port was the crown jewel of the Midwest supply chain. And as of 1 hour ago, Alaric said, his gaze shifting from me to my mother, his eyes turning to chips of ice, "I signed full, unmitigated ownership, controlling shares, and absolute executive authority of that entire project over to one person." He pointed directly at me. "My wife, Genevieve Vance." The room erupted. Reporters scrambled, executives gasped, the sheer magnitude of the power transfer sending shockwaves through the crowd. "She is not a show pony," Alaric's voice roared over the noise, fiercely protective and brutally final. "She is the sole proprietor of the largest logistics hub in the state. And anyone in this room, any corporation, any firm, any executive who wishes to move freight through the Midwest will now have to sit at a table and ask for her permission." He lowered the microphone slightly. "There are people who spent 31 years treating her like she was invisible," Alaric said, the final blow aimed directly at my parents. "Thank you. Your profound blindness gave me the opportunity to recognize a queen when I saw one." Alaric stepped down from the stage and walked through the parting crowd, straight toward me. I looked at my mother. The reality of what had just happened crashed down on her. She had spent her life trying to climb into this world. She had just realized that her invisible, discarded daughter now owned the gates. I didn't say another word to her. I didn't need to. I took Alaric's offered arm, turned my back on my parents, and walked toward the center of the dance floor. The string quartet began to play. And as we danced under the painted sky of the Beaux-Arts ceiling, I left my mother standing alone in the ruins of the kingdom she could never enter. The aftermath of the Beaux-Arts gala was swift, brutal, and entirely silent. I did not give interviews. I did not post statements on social media. I let the sheer, undeniable weight of the facts do the talking. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been permanently rewritten. The gossip blogs that had called me a gold digger deleted their articles overnight, replacing them with frantic, fawning analyses of the Northwestern Logistics Port acquisition. The business world realized that Alaric Vance had not just handed me a vanity project, he had handed me a loaded weapon, and I knew exactly how to fire it. My own logistics firm absorbed the port operations flawlessly. Within 2 months, I was sitting in boardrooms negotiating contracts with the same executives who had whispered about me in the ballroom. But true power isn't just about what you build, it's about what you dismantle. On a quiet, rainy Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after the gala, a notification popped up on my secure banking app. Incoming wire transfer, $85,000. There was no note attached. No desperate email begging for forgiveness. Just the exact sum of money that had been stolen from Grandma Beatrix's trust fund, returned in full. I sat at my desk, looking at the numbers on the screen. The money did not fix the betrayal. It did not erase the 31 years of being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. But it was a white flag. It was the ultimate, undeniable proof of their surrender. I learned later, through a brief and strictly professional email from Maeve, how the money was sourced. My parents had to sell the house. The sprawling, beige suburban home where they had hosted Serafina's lavish graduation parties, the home where my science trophies had been shoved into the basement, it was gone. They sold it at a massive loss to avoid the looming threat of my lawyers pressing federal wire fraud charges. They downsized to a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable suburb. Harrison, fired and publicly disgraced by Nathaniel Vance, found it impossible to secure another executive role in the hospitality industry. The industry runs on relationships, and he had proven he had none. He took a job managing a mid-tier chain hotel off the interstate. And Serafina, the golden child, the fragile, beautiful sister who needed to be protected at all costs. When the money was returned to me, the Miami investors were left empty-handed. They filed the civil suits. The SEC officially barred Serafina from acting as a director or officer for any public company, and her fraudulent LLC was dissolved. She declared bankruptcy to avoid prison time. The last I heard, she was working as a floor associate at a fast fashion retail store, scanning barcodes and folding cheap sweaters. They had sacrificed everything to protect a lie, and in the end, the truth stripped them down to nothing. I did not keep the $85,000. I didn't need it. I took the entire sum, matched it with my own money, and established the Beatrix Vanguard Scholarship. It was a trust designed specifically for young women in the Midwest pursuing degrees in supply chain management and logistics, women who were working full-time, women who didn't have a safety net, women who had to build their own doors because no one was going to open one for them. On the day the scholarship launched, I took the afternoon off. I drove out to the cemetery where Grandma Beatrix was buried. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of turning autumn leaves. I knelt by her headstone and placed a small bouquet of green hydrangeas against the granite. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered to the cold stone. I stopped waiting for them to show up. I built my own crowd. I touched the scratched face of her watch on my wrist, feeling a profound, unshakable peace settle into my bones. The rage that had fueled me for months had burned itself out, leaving behind a clear, quiet strength. I stood up and walked back to my car where Alaric was waiting, leaning against the door. He didn't ask what I said to her. He just opened the door for me, his presence a constant, unwavering anchor in my life. There are people who will tell you that family is everything. That blood is a bond that cannot be broken, no matter how much it hurts you. They will tell you that forgiveness is mandatory and that setting a boundary makes you cruel. They are wrong. Respect is not a debt you owe someone simply because they share your DNA. Respect is earned. Love is earned. And loyalty is a two-way street. The moment you stop setting yourself on fire to keep toxic people warm is the moment you finally learn how to breathe. I survived the museum of my own invisibility. I survived the stolen inheritance, the empty chairs, and the public humiliation. I survived because I finally realized that the only person whose permission I needed to be happy was my own. I am Genevieve Vance. I own the port. I own my future. And I will never, ever be invisible again. So, I have to ask you. There are people on the internet who still call me ruthless. They say I went too far. They say that forcing my parents to sell their home, letting my father lose his career, and watching my sister go bankrupt was a disproportionate punishment for missing a wedding. They say I should have taken the high road, accepted their apologies, and helped them when they hit rock bottom. Do you think I was wrong? Do you think I should have used my power to save the people who threw me to the wolves, or was I justified in letting them drink the poison they brewed for me? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know where you draw the line between family duty and self-preservation. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever been the invisible child who had to build your own empire, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring these stories to light. Thank you for listening, and remember, you don't need a crowd to know you shine. See you in the next one.